The millionaire's son never laughed until he saw the nanny on the floor. The black Bentley glided smoothly through the nearly 3-meter-high iron gates of the villa compound, its engine making almost no sound. The automatic gates closed behind Alexander Hale, sealing him off from the outside world like a familiar ritual. The workday had ended earlier than expected, yet there was no sense of relief that came with it. The Hale villa rose before him, massive, flawless, and cold. The exterior lighting system switched on automatically, illuminating the imported gray stone walls, a material Alexander had once taken pride in for its durability and value. This house was the result of a lifetime of negotiations, acquisitions, and victories. But as he stepped out of the car, he did not feel as though he was coming home. Alexander Hale walked inside. His dark coat still held its perfect creases. The only trace of the overnight flight was the deep hollows beneath his eyes from lack of sleep. In his hand was a slim but heavy briefcase carrying signatures powerful enough to shake an entire stretch of coastal land. He had not taken another step when he suddenly stopped. His fingers lost their strength. The briefcase slipped from his hand and struck the cold stone floor with a sharp, clean sound, echoing far too clearly in the silent space. But Alexander did not react. He stood motionless, as if his entire body had been locked in place. An unfamiliar sensation tightened around his chest, not pain, but something that cut his breath short, as though someone had just closed the valve to the air. It was not an alarm, not an illegal intrusion. It was a sound that should not exist in this house. Laughter, light, brief, then breaking out again, young, clear, echoing from the far end of the hallway. A sound that had vanished from Alexander's life so long ago that he had come to believe it existed only in memory. His heartbeat instantly fell out of rhythm, pounding fast and heavy, as if desperately reminding him that he was still alive. He moved forward slowly, one step at a time, so cautious he barely dared to touch the floor. His expensive leather shoes suddenly felt clumsy, out of place in this fragile moment. He was afraid, not of what he might see, but of the possibility that a single wrong movement would cause that sound to disappear, as if it had never existed. When Alexander leaned to look through the opening leading into the family room, where the late sunlight spilled across the pale wooden floor, the scene before him left him frozen in shock. On the floor, Mia Carter lay on her back, her body pressed against the rug, dark brown hair fanned slightly around her head. Above her, held securely in her arms, Noah hovered in the air, his small body tilting like a toy airplane. The yellow rubber gloves, meant for scrubbing toilets and floors, were now holding Alexander's son with an impossible gentleness. "Up you go! Higher!" Mia said softly, her voice warm and unaware that she was in the living room of one of the most powerful men in the city. Noah burst into laughter. It was not a weak or fleeting laugh. It was a full, resonant sound that rose from his chest and set his entire little body in motion. Noah's eyes lit up, bright and shimmering, his small hands reaching out instinctively, trying to grasp Mia's face. Alexander felt his knees go weak. His son was laughing, truly laughing, not on a therapy schedule, not following a specialist's instructions, but laughing out of pure, simple joy, the most natural joy of a child. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling bulletproof glass, shining directly onto the scene. The light touched Mia's hair, the absurdly conspicuous yellow rubber gloves on her hands, and Noah's radiant face. The contrast was too stark, too cruel. A poor cleaning worker, a child heir to a vast fortune, a simple game on a marble floor. Time seemed to stop. Then Mia looked up. She saw him. All movement froze instantly. She lowered Noah, not in a rush, but with firm decisiveness, settling the boy in the middle of the rug. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her collar, her gaze brushing past Alexander before dropping immediately to the floor. "Mr. Hale." Her voice was soft, clearly struggling to remain calm. I'm not allowed to—" Alexander did not answer right away. He saw Noah turn to look at him, then back to Mia, his arms lifting in a familiar reflex. The gesture tightened Alexander's chest. "How long?" he asked. Mia stiffened. "Sir? How long has my son been like this?" He did not point at Noah, but they both understood. Mia swallowed. "Just a few minutes. I was cleaning the playroom when he started crying. I meant to lift him and put him back in the crib, but he wouldn't let go." Alexander raised a hand to his forehead. The images were painfully familiar. Nights when Noah cried himself into exhaustion, closed doors, hollow advice. He had stood only meters away from his son, and yet dared not touch him. "You know the rules, don't you?" he continued, his voice low but not harsh. "Staff are not allowed to—" "I know," Mia cut in, then immediately regretted it. She lowered her head even further. "I know very well. Please don't fire me. I really need this job." Alexander looked at Noah. The little boy crawled toward Mia, clutching at the leg of her pants like a survival reflex. A bitter sensation rose inside him. Jealousy, shame, then helplessness. "What did Vivian say about this?" he asked, almost to himself. Mia hesitated. "Ms. Cross said he shouldn't be held too much, that children need to learn discipline early." Alexander let out a soft laugh, not a happy one. He took a few steps into the room, loosened his tie, and let it fall onto the table. "Noah doesn't need more discipline," he said. "He needs something I don't know how to give." The room fell silent. Only the steady breathing of the child remained. "What time does your shift end?" Alexander asked. 10 minutes to 5, sir. I have to leave early to catch the bus." "You'll stay," he said. It wasn't an order, it was a decision. "Stay with the boy?" she asked softly. "I'm just a cleaner. I don't have the authority, and my company won't accept this." Alexander did not raise his voice, but the way he straightened, the way his tone dropped, made the room feel compressed. "From now on, you'll be his nanny," he said. "The contract, the schedule, any regulations, those are all within my power to handle." Mia froze. The offer went far beyond anything she had ever imagined. But when she looked down, Noah was already leaning fully against her leg, his small hands gripping tightly, as if the world had narrowed to this single anchor. She took a deep breath. "All right," Mia said slowly. "I'll stay." Alexander was about to nod when she continued, "But not in the way you think." He looked up at her, for the first time truly noticing the steadiness in her eyes, behind the shy exterior. "Noah doesn't need another person to soothe him," Mia said. "He needs to feel that his father is here too. I can stay with him tonight, but you have to be involved." Alexander frowned. "Involved?" The silence stretched on. Alexander was not used to being asked, especially not in this way. In his mind flashed the image of his late wife, who had once looked at him with that same expression. Not challenging, just waiting. He let out a slow breath. "All right," he said. "Tonight, I'll try." Noah lifted his head as if he understood something and let out a soft laugh. The sound of high heels echoed from the main hallway, not hurried but decisive, each step striking the stone floor like a warning. The sound brought an instant change to the air, like a window being opened in the middle of winter. Noah froze. The little boy shrank closer to Mia, his small fingers instinctively gripping the hem of her clothes. "Alex," Vivian spoke, her voice high and clear, carrying undisguised irritation. "I didn't know you were home early." Her gaze swept quickly across the room, then stopped at the scene before her. Noah sitting on the floor, his hand still clutching Mia's pant leg. Mia stood there, her rubber gloves not yet removed, and Alexander was standing far too close to them. A small crease appeared between Vivian's brows. "What is going on here?" she asked, folding her arms across her chest. Alexander had not yet answered when Noah shifted, letting out a faint sound as if trying to draw attention. Vivian glanced at the boy, a flicker of irritation crossing her eyes before it vanished just as quickly. "Mia will be staying tonight," Alexander said calmly. Vivian spun to look at him. "Staying? For what?" "To be with Noah." The air in the room seemed to freeze. Vivian let out a soft laugh, one that never reached her eyes. "We have nannies, trained professionals, not cleaning staff." Her gaze moved to Mia, assessing her from head to toe, lingering on the yellow rubber gloves as though they were a personal offense. "Mia is doing well," Alexander replied shortly. The silence lasted exactly one breath. Vivian smiled, but it was a smile honed in boardrooms filled with calculation. "If you say so," she softened her tone, stepping closer. "But I think children need discipline, not playing on the floor like this." Noah shrank back, pressing himself closer to Mia. That instinctive gesture did not escape Vivian's notice. Something flickered in her eyes. Not anger, but wariness. Vivian was used to being the center, used to controlling space, people, emotions. And now, in just a few minutes, a woman in a simple uniform had done what Vivian never had. When Vivian turned away and walked toward the stairs, her lips still held that flawless smile. But in her mind, a cold thought was taking shape. That woman wasn't just breaking the rules. She was a threat. Vivian Cross closed the bedroom door behind her with a gentle, almost elegant motion. But the moment the door shut, the smile on her lips vanished completely. The spacious room, styled like the pages of a high-end interior design magazine, reflected Vivian's image in a full-length, gold-framed mirror. She stood still, staring straight at herself. The woman in the mirror was perfect down to every detail. No cracks, no flaws. Vivian had built that image over many years, and she did not allow anyone to shake it, especially not a cleaning worker. Vivian removed her diamond necklace and placed it carefully on the vanity. Her movements were slow and deliberate. In her mind, the pieces were already rearranging themselves, cold and precise. She recalled the moment Noah pressed himself against Mia, the way Alexander had stood closer to that woman than necessary. His gaze no longer belonged entirely to Vivian, just a fraction less. But to Vivian, even a fraction was too much. She was used to controlling everything through her presence, her charm, her status, her carefully polished perfection. But Mia Carter did not play by those rules. That woman did not need to try. She only needed to sit down on the floor. That frightened Vivian. Vivian opened a drawer and took out her diamond engagement ring. The large stone, cold to the touch, reflected the chandelier light into sharp, cutting rays. A symbol of her position in this house, in Alexander's life. She turned the ring between her fingers, her lips curving into a thin smile. Perfect! But the quiet had barely settled when it was torn apart by a sound from the neighboring room, a soft, broken, childlike laugh. Vivian halted. She frowned. She could not tolerate sounds that were not part of the plan. Children, to her, should exist only in family photographs or at necessary social occasions. Outside of those moments, they were to be controlled like any other risk factor. She pushed open Noah's door without knocking. Inside, Mia was squatting on the floor, her back to the door. She was gently fastening the last button on Noah's shirt. The child stood unnaturally still, his hands fiddling with the hem of Mia's uniform, his mouth making small, indistinct sounds, yet completely relaxed. Vivian tightened her grip on her bag strap. "Are you not finished yet?" she said, her voice level but sharp as a blade. Mia startled and turned, quickly standing up, instinctively keeping Noah close at her side. When Noah saw Vivian, he shrank slightly, pressing himself fully against Mia's leg. That gesture did not escape Vivian's notice. "Listen carefully," Vivian said softly, her voice low but cold. "Do not mistake temporary kindness for a permanent position. Alexander may be softening, but that does not change the hierarchy in this house." Mia looked up, startled. I just want him to feel safe." "Safety is something that is controlled," Vivian cut in, "not something that is indulged." She stepped back, adjusting the necklace at her throat out of habit. "And remember this. In this house, everything has a price. If anything goes wrong, even something small, you will be the first held responsible." A chill ran down Mia's spine. "I didn't do anything wrong," Vivian shrugged. "No one ever admits it before they're caught." She turned away, her dress swaying lightly with her steps, then stopped at the doorway. "Keep the boy quiet during dinner," Vivian added, without looking back. "I don't want any disruptions." The door closed. Mia let out a slow breath. Noah trembled slightly, his arms clinging tightly to her. Mia knelt down and pulled him into her embrace, whispering close to his ear, "It's okay. Mia's here." Dinner began right on time. The main dining room of the Hale estate gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers, the long walnut table set with flawless precision. Crystal glasses, silver cutlery, neatly folded napkins, everything radiated wealth without the need for display. Alexander sat at the head of the table, his expression composed, his voice steady as he spoke with the investors. Vivian sat beside him, her smile impeccable, every nod carefully calculated. She was the perfect image of a woman who belonged to this world. There was only one thing that had not been planned. Noah. In the small family room next door, Mia sat on the rug, trying to keep Noah calm. The boy was exhausted. A long day, too much stimulation, too many unfamiliar faces. Noah pressed his head against Mia's chest, his small fingers clutching the hem of her shirt. "It's okay," Mia whispered. "Let's play the quiet game." In the dining room, an elderly investor leaned toward Alexander. "Mr. Hale," he said slowly, "in Asia, we place great importance on family. A man who cannot keep peace in his own home will find it difficult to maintain balance in business." Alexander nodded, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. "Family is my priority." And at that exact moment, the crying began. At first it was just a small sob. Then it quickly rose into a sharp, piercing cry that cut straight through the formal atmosphere of the room. Every conversation stopped instantly. Vivian closed her eyes briefly. Alexander rose from his chair on instinct, but Vivian's hand came down on his arm, light yet firm. "I'll take care of it," she said gently. "That girl probably doesn't know how to soothe a child." She stood and moved quickly toward the adjoining room. The moment she stepped out of sight of the dinner table, the softness vanished from her face. Noah was sobbing uncontrollably. Mia was holding him, rocking gently, but the small body had begun to tremble from exhaustion and stress. "This child needs discipline," Vivian said coldly. "Not to be carried like this." "He needs sleep," Mia replied, her voice shaking but steady. "He's completely worn out." Vivian bent down. Her movement was fast, precise, almost impossible to notice. Her well-manicured fingers pinched hard into Noah's soft arm. The boy's cry instantly exploded into a scream of panic. Mia froze. "Don't do that," she blurted out instinctively, shielding Noah with her body. At that moment, Alexander walked in. The scene before him was chaos. Noah screaming, Mia shaken, and Vivian standing there, her expression already rearranged into perfect concern. "Alexander," Vivian said quickly. "She can't control the boy." Before Alexander could respond, Mia did something no one expected. She sat down on the floor, placed Noah in her lap, and said nothing more. She began to hum softly, an old melody, slow and deep, like breathing. Noah's crying faltered. He sobbed a few more times, then buried his face in Mia's chest. Within seconds, the panic dissolved, leaving a small body breathing hard but safe. Silence filled the room. The investors had gathered at the doorway, witnessing everything. One of them spoke quietly. "A child recognizes a true heart." Alexander looked at Mia, then at Noah. In that moment, he did not see a cleaning worker. He saw the only person who brought his son peace. The silence lasted only a few seconds, but to Mia it weighed as heavily as an entire lifetime. Vivian was the one who broke it. She stepped forward, her high heels tapping lightly against the floor like a final period. "Alexander," she said, her voice trembling just enough to sound wounded. "I think something is wrong." Alexander turned to look at her. "What do you mean?" Vivian lifted a hand to her chest as if trying to catch her breath. "My engagement ring. It's not on my hand anymore." The room immediately stirred. Alexander frowned. "Are you sure? You were wearing it during dinner?" "I took it off in the bathroom to wash my hands," Vivian replied at once, without hesitation. "When I came back, it was gone." Her gaze slowly shifted toward Mia. "At that time," Vivian continued, her voice lowering, "there was only one unfamiliar person in that area." Mia looked up, stunned. I don't understand." "You're the only one who needs money," Vivian said, no longer pretending to be gentle. "I heard you on the phone talking about your mother's hospital bills." Alexander felt his heart sink. "No," Mia shook her head. "I've never seen that ring, I swear." "Then search her belongings," Vivian suggested firmly. "If she's innocent, she won't object." Mia swallowed hard, then nodded. "Go ahead. I have nothing to hide." They moved into the service room. Alexander opened Mia's old cloth bag. He emptied everything onto the table: clothes, a wallet, a comb, an old photograph. Nothing. A wave of relief crossed Mia's face. "See?" Alexander turned to Vivian. "There's no—" "The gloves," Vivian cut in. "The gloves." Alexander hesitated, then reached into the side pocket and pulled out the yellow rubber gloves. A heavy object fell onto the table with a cold clink. The ring? Time seemed to stop. Mia stared, eyes wide, shaking her head over and over. "No, that's impossible. I didn't do that." Alexander looked at the ring, then at Mia. The expression on his face changed completely. The warmth that had just begun to form vanished, replaced by the familiar coldness of a man accustomed to betrayal. "You used my son," he said slowly, "to gain my trust." Mia broke down in tears. "No, please. Noah knows I'm not bad." "Don't say my son's name," Alexander cut her off. He straightened. "You're fired, right now." Vivian bent down, picked up the ring, and slipped it back onto her finger, the corner of her lips lifting slightly. Mia clutched her bag and stumbled toward the back door, trembling. Behind her, the door closed, and the laughter that had once echoed in this house disappeared. The reception room sank into a heavy stillness. Not peace, but the kind of silence constructed to conceal something that had just been cut away. Alexander raised a hand to his forehead and drew a slow breath. He turned back to the guests still seated around the table, his voice maintaining the composed tone of a host accustomed to dealing with major partners. "I apologize for the unnecessary interruption," he said. "Personnel management these days is no longer as simple as it once was." The elderly man looked toward the door through which Mia had left, his gaze lingering longer than social courtesy required. "What a pity," he said. Alexander nodded slightly. He glanced at Vivian, who leaned close beside him, her hand resting possessively on his arm. Vivian smiled and tilted her head to press a light kiss against his cheek, a gesture just visible enough for others to see, just enough to mark a victory. "You handled it very well," she whispered. "This house needs to remain in order. Noah will be fine once those messy influences are gone." Alexander did not argue. He nodded out of habit, but his gaze drifted toward the empty hallway. A dull, hollow sensation surfaced, unclear, unnamed, as though he had made the right decision, yet lost something that could never be bought back. Upstairs, Noah woke. Crying echoed, not violent, just small, wandering sounds, searching. The boy called out by instinct for a presence that was no longer there, but no footsteps came down the stairs. No one bent down, no familiar arms. The reception ended on schedule. The background music was switched off. The staff cleaned up swiftly and precisely. The villa returned to its ideal state, clean, perfect, and without a single trace of living warmth. The next morning, Noah didn't eat. The spoon touched his lips, and then fell. No reaction, no resistance, just a weary indifference. His eyes looked straight through the room, stopping at the door, as if waiting for someone to walk in. Alexander stood beside him, feeling a vague unease. "He'll eat later," he said, as though speaking to himself. But by noon, Noah still hadn't eaten. By afternoon, he didn't play. The expensive toys lay motionless on the floor, untouched. Noah simply sat there, his back against the crib railing, his gaze empty. When the fever began, Alexander realized something was terribly wrong. Noah's forehead burned. His small body felt frighteningly light. This wasn't the tiredness of a child after a long day. It was a slow withdrawal from the world around him. Alexander lifted his son into his arms, feeling fear for the first time that could not be measured in money. Noah didn't struggle, but he didn't cling to him either. He simply lay still in his father's arms, as if he had stopped waiting. Dr. Reynolds arrived at the Hale estate close to midnight. He was a middle-aged man with a small build, hair graying at the temples, and the alert eyes of someone long accustomed to emergency cases. Unlike others, he showed no impression of the house's luxury. When he entered Noah's room, he skipped formal greetings and focused solely on the child lying motionless in his father's arms. The doctor examined Noah carefully. Ears, throat, heart rate, lungs. The thermometer emitted a short beep, and the number that appeared made Alexander hold his breath. "Nearly 40 degrees, Alexander said hoarsely. "What infection does my son have? I can call a medical helicopter, anywhere, any cost." Dr. Reynolds shook his head slowly. "There is no infection." Alexander froze. "That's impossible. He has such a high fever." "Clear lungs, no ear infection, no throat inflammation," the doctor said, calm but firm. "His body isn't fighting bacteria." "Then what is it?" Alexander asked, his voice beginning to break. Dr. Reynolds was silent for a few seconds, then looked directly at him. "This is a severe psychological response. We call it attachment depression." Alexander frowned. "Depression? My son is only 2 years old." "Children don't need to understand the concept to suffer from it," the doctor replied. "His body is reacting to an emotional shock." The air in the room felt heavy. "What shock?" Alexander asked. "The child lost his primary attachment figure abruptly," the doctor said slowly. For Noah, it was a real loss. Horror. Fragments flooded Alexander's mind. Laughter, the yellow rubber gloves, Noah clinging to Mia's pant leg. "Noah's body is rejecting the world," the doctor continued. "If this persists, we'll have to hospitalize him, feed him through a tube. But even medication cannot replace what he has lost." Alexander whispered, barely audible. "And what is that?" Dr. Reynolds looked at him for a long moment. "Bonded love," he said, "and you took it away." The room sank into silence after Dr. Reynolds's words. Alexander stood frozen, feeling as if the ground beneath his feet had just collapsed. In that moment, every justification he had ever used to defend his decision became meaningless. If Noah was slowly fading because he had lost his bond, then there was only one possible conclusion. He had fired the wrong person. "Is there any way to save him?" Alexander asked, his voice low and hoarse, as if he had just swallowed a truth too heavy to bear. Dr. Reynolds nodded. "Yes, but not with medicine. The only thing that can help Noah right now is the person he bonded with." Alexander closed his eyes. Mia's image appeared with painful clarity. And immediately after, another thought, colder, more terrifying, rose up. "What if she isn't innocent?" he asked, almost in a whisper. Dr. Reynolds looked at him for a long time. "If you still doubt her, then be certain, but don't let your ego kill your son." The words struck like a knife. Alexander turned and strode toward the desk in the room. "What are you going to do?" Vivian stepped forward, trying to maintain her composure. "The surveillance system," Alexander replied. "I need to review it." The color drained from Vivian's face. The glass in her hand slipped and fell onto the thick carpet, the pale liquid spreading like a stain that could not be hidden. "The service room camera isn't working," Vivian said quickly. "I told you already." "They upgraded it last week," Alexander replied, typing in a password. "Everything is stored." The silence that followed was so heavy, Vivian couldn't argue. She stood still, lips parted, her eyes revealing something Alexander had never seen so clearly before. Fear. "Sit down, Vivian," he said quietly. "Let's watch together." The screen lit up. The room was bathed in the pale blue glow of data. Noah wheezed softly in Dr. Reynolds's arms. Vivian stood by the door, motionless. Alexander opened the camera list, selected the staff area, and scrubbed back to the timestamp from the evening. The footage appeared, clear, sharp, and brutally unforgiving. The door opened. Not Mia. Vivian. Alexander felt his chest hollow out. On the screen, Vivian glanced around, locked the door, and walked toward the chair where Mia's bag rested. No hurry, no hesitation, just intent. She reached inside, took out the ring, slipped it into another item, then carefully rearranged everything. Before leaving, she stood in front of the mirror, adjusted her hair, took a deep breath, and smiled. Alexander froze the frame at that exact moment. Then he turned around. Vivian had gone deathly pale. "Alexander, I can explain," she stammered. "I just wanted to check whether she—" "Check?" His voice dropped, not loud. "Then why didn't you call it a check when you accused her in front of our partners?" Vivian stumbled back half a step. I panicked. She doesn't belong in our world." Alexander didn't respond. He turned back to the screen. "And this," he said. "The doctor said Noah showed an abnormal pain response." He opened the camera from the family room and rewound to just before everything fell apart. The image appeared. Noah was playing. Calm. Peaceful. Then Vivian entered. A few words were exchanged, unclear. Mia bent down to pick up a toy, and in that brief moment, Vivian leaned down, her fingers pinching hard into Noah's arm. The scream that followed was sharp and full of pain. Alexander turned back toward Vivian. There was no trace of desire or hesitation left in his eyes. What remained was a cold emptiness, the look of someone facing something that could no longer be considered human. "You hurt Noah," he said slowly, his voice terrifyingly even. "Not by accident, but deliberately." Vivian tried to stand tall, though her knees trembled slightly. "You're exaggerating everything?" "And the ring?" Alexander cut in. He didn't raise his voice. Something flashed in Vivian's eyes. "She crossed the line. She thought she had a place in this house. I am the one who is going to be your wife." Alexander stepped forward, not fast, not rushed, just enough for Vivian to feel the pressure. She fell silent. Real fear surfaced, not the fear of losing status, but fear of the man standing in front of her. "You're wrong about everything," Alexander said. "You don't own this house, you don't own me, and you certainly have no place in my child's future." Vivian clenched her hands. "You can't destroy everything because of one video. We have legal agreements. Lawyers can't erase images," Alexander replied. "You have 10 seconds. Vivian looked around. The doctor stood there, his contempt undisguised. There was no way back. "Leave my house," Alexander said. "Now." Vivian's mouth fell open. "You're throwing me out in the middle of the night? Do you know who I am? Do you know what people will say?" Alexander let out a dry laugh. "People will hear the story I tell. If you leave quietly, I'll say we separated due to irreconcilable differences. But if you speak against me or come anywhere near my son even once, every recording will appear in places you can't control." He looked straight into her eyes. "You choose?" Vivian gasped, searching for a crack, a trace of softness. There was nothing but stone. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "You'll be alone. No one wants to deal with a broken child. She won't come back." Alexander didn't waver. "Maybe, but I'd rather be alone than keep a venomous snake near my son." He pointed toward the door. "Leave immediately." Vivian spun around and stormed out. The sound of her heels rang wildly across the carpet, followed by crashing objects and angry shouts. A few minutes later, the roar of a sports car engine erupted at the gate and vanished into the night. Alexander stood still for a long time. When true silence finally returned, he exhaled, his shoulders sagging with exhaustion. "She's gone," he murmured, almost to himself. On the bed, Noah shifted slightly, and for the first time that night, the house no longer carried the breath of fear. Alexander didn't wait until morning. As soon as Noah slipped into a shallow, restless sleep, he stood up, hastily pulled on his vest, and left the room as if he delayed even one more second, he might lose the courage to go on. There was only one name in his mind: Mia Carter. Alexander rushed down the stairs, his voice cutting through the quiet of the night. "Get the car ready, now!" The Bentley left the Hale estate in the thin mist of early dawn. No driver. Alexander drove himself. His hands clenched the steering wheel, his eyes bloodshot, fixed on the road ahead, as if the slightest deviation would cost him the last chance he had. He remembered the moment Mia walked out the back door, her back straight, but her shoulders trembling. He remembered her eyes when he accused her, not hatred, but disappointment. That pain now came rushing back, sharper than any failure he had ever known. The car stopped in front of an old apartment block in the southern part of the city. Alexander got out, not caring that the drizzle soaked through his jacket. He ran up the stairs and stopped in front of a door with peeling paint. He raised his hand, then stopped. For the first time in his life, Alexander Hale was afraid, not of loss, but of hope. Because if this door did not open, he would have to face the truth that some mistakes are never forgiven. He knocked. From inside came cautious footsteps. "Who is it?" Mia Carter's voice was tense, not soft anymore, only wary. "It's me," Alexander said quietly. "Alexander Hale." A pause stretched, suffocating. "Go away," Mia said, her voice broken but firm. "If you've brought the police, there's no need to knock. I've lost my job, my reputation. There's nothing left for them to take." "Not the police," Alexander said immediately. "I came alone, and I need to talk about Noah." At the sound of the child's name, the latch shifted slightly. The door opened a crack. Mia stood in the dim light, eyes red from crying, hair hastily tied back, an old T-shirt hanging loosely. She saw Alexander drenched from the rain, his face carrying a panic she had never seen on that powerful man. "How is Noah?" she asked, brushing everything else aside. Alexander swallowed. "Not well, high fever, not eating, not responding. Dr. Reynolds says His attachment is collapsing rapidly. Since you disappeared." Mia turned her face away, breathing sharply to suppress a sob. Then she looked straight at Alexander, her eyes turning cold. "So what do you want?" she asked. "You believed Vivian Cross. You let me be thrown out like a thief. Now you want me to come back to save your son?" "Vivian is no longer in my house," Alexander said quickly. "I reviewed the entire system. I know the truth. I was wrong." Mia froze. "You know?" "I know," Alexander said hoarsely, "and there are no words enough to apologize. But Noah, he's shutting down, and the only person he's searching for is you." Mia looked at him for a long time. Finally, she spoke slowly and clearly. "I'm not coming back for you. I'm coming back for Noah." Alexander nodded. "That's enough." They raced back to the estate through the rain. No ceremony, no distance. The second-floor hallway was eerily quiet. Noah's bedroom door was ajar, pale yellow light spilling out. Mia stepped inside, and her heart tightened. Noah lay small and fragile in the middle of the large bed. His skin was pale, his eyes open but empty. Dr. Reynolds sat beside him, exhaustion weighing his shoulders down. "Mia," he breathed. "Thank God." She didn't need to hear more. Her bag fell to the floor. Mia sat on the edge of the bed and touched the child's small, cold hand. "Mia's here," she whispered. "Mia's back." No response. Mia leaned closer, gently brushing his damp forehead. "No one is sending Nana away anymore. Nana is here." She began to hum the old melody, no words, just the familiar rhythm. Noah's fingers twitched slightly. His eyes blinked slowly, then settled on Mia. The sound was weak but real. Mia broke into tears, lifting Noah into her arms. The child let out a long breath, buried his face against her neck, trembled slightly, then began to cry, not from pain, but from safety. Alexander stood frozen in the doorway, tears streaming uncontrollably. Dr. Reynolds placed his fingers on Noah's wrist, checked the pulse, then nodded. "His temperature is coming down. Emotional response has returned," he said. "The bond is saving him." Alexander sank into a chair. Mia rocked Noah gently. "Are you hungry?" Noah nodded weakly. "I'll do it," Alexander said at once. When he returned with a bottle, the sight before him caught his breath. Noah drinking slowly in Mia's arms, occasionally reaching up to touch her cheek, as if to make sure Nana was still there. Alexander took off his shoes, climbed onto the bed, and sat beside them. "Dad's here," he said, wrapping his arms around them. "We're all here." Noah reached out and grasped his hand. Outside, the rain stopped falling. Inside, a family was stitched back together. By love, not by blood.